All right, so let's just go ahead and get this started. And now a word from our sponsors.
Back to work, back to work. All right. Hey, Manny, how are you doing? Oh, it was great. Let me tell you, being at the beach is amazing. I loved it, having those waves crash against my body, the sand between my toes. Those dang sharks. Anyway, how's everything here? Any troubles? Well, that's great. Like what? Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's gonna save us so much time. That's all. You're such a slacker. What now? How does that work? No. What's this about Lightspeed?
I saw the darkest hours of troubleshooting
Manny.
pierced
Really.
by the bright spark of the most recent revalidation date, appended faithfully and verified by checksum. It completed the log bundle transfer.
Manny.
As it
Really?
completed.
As a matter of fact, it's already here. And with that, let's just go ahead and officially kick this off. Hello, everyone. I'm Kelsey Lemon. I'm a Senior Technical Marketing Manager here at VMware. And if you enjoyed that Skyline commercial, we've got definitely a very special treat for you today. And I can't think of a better way, actually, to close out our 2022 webinar series. We've got Richard Harris, a man who needs no introduction to our community of Skyline customers, but for those of you who do not know who he is, Richard is a cloud architect from Rackspace, and he's going to share some great insight into his experience with the service. Richard, it's a pleasure having you today here, my friend.
Thank you, Kelsey. It's great to be here.
And of course, in addition to Richard, of course, we've got our gang of usual suspects. No webinar would be complete without Sunny, Michelle, and Daniela, and they're going to be monitoring our online conversation. And in the spirit of conversation, right, you should definitely take advantage of Richard being here today and ask questions. So make sure that you're using that Q&A option at the bottom of the screen there. And if you'd like to share your success story, either in chat, or if you want to come off mute for that matter, you want to share your story, Michelle and Daniela would definitely love to hear from you. As a matter of fact, they've got some cool swag, as you can see, to give away. So keep that in mind as we go through today's presentation. We've already gone through the poll results. And so with that, Richard, my friend, are you ready to do this?
Let's do it.
All right. And so, before, Richard, before we move into the interview, I got to do a quick overview of the service, for any new customers in today's audience. And it seems like we got a couple. And for those customers, who may be seeing this on demand as well. And so while I'm doing that, feel free to type your questions to Richard. Let's put Richard to work, right? And so with that, let's just jump right in and talk about the service itself by answering that key question, exactly what is Skyline, right? And so, basically to answer that question, I want to set some context about the overall experience that I'm sure that you can all relate to, right? So here goes, as a customer, I'm sure you're all very familiar with that very traditional, that reactive support scenario, right? You experience a issue in your environment, you open an SR at VMware, then our tech support team troubleshoots with you and they work with you to solve that issue, right? Well, with that being said, right, Skyline is actually the next step in that process is actually a proactive support technology, meaning that it can actually actually help you avoid issues before they happen. So you don't even have the problem in the first place. But here's the best part, right? Skyline is available at no additional cost with your active production or premier support contracts. And I'm also very happy to say that Skyline is also included with Success 360 and Area Universal Suite subscriptions. And it supports all the products listed on the screen there. And one of the things that I want to point out, right, is that Skyline's automated detection and proactive, that remediation guidance, right, it actually helps you strengthen your environments. And so with the service, you can avoid IT downtime, and then you can actually reallocate that time to do more valuable work. But with that being said, right, Skyline is also reactive in the sense that it actually helps you resolve existing issues faster. So say, for example, right, you've got a case open with us, our tech support engineers can use Skyline to view your environment specific configurations, right? And then they can use data-driven analytics to actually speed discovery and ultimately drive those faster resolution times that we're all looking forward to. So basically the bottom line is that, Skyline helps you get proactive so that you can stay productive. And so instead of constantly being in that firefighting mode, Skyline helps you focus and take that time and prioritize those high business initiatives instead. And, these capabilities, right, they're driving value to our customers, right? We're hearing that Skyline helps our customers, again, avoid constantly being in that firefighting mode. Our customers are saying that they're reducing that very costly downtime, which quite often is caused by misconfigurations. And the increased network reliability that Skyline provides actually translates into less time fixing errors. And as you can see here, from a recent industry report, 1 hour of downtime, 1 hour, for an enterprise averages anywhere from $1 to $5 million. And companies who are strategically, right, they're making that decision to take a more proactive approach to support, they're significantly reducing that unplanned downtime. And we're talking hundreds of hours. And to date, Skyline has helped over 14,000 plus customers identify 168 million objects. Yes, you heard that right. 168 million objects in their environments with potential issues. And our customers have proactively resolved more than 73% of those on their own. And again, when there are times where you may need to react to an issue that wasn't proactively resolved, right? Skyline can support you here as well through our log assist feature, which is 17 times faster than that manual upload and transfer process. And that's basically, when you boil it all down, it translates into nearly 100,000 hours saved. And if you've done that traditional log transfer process, right, I'm sure you can relate to how slow that is. And so with the log assist feature, it actually removes that pain, again, giving you that very valuable time back to do more meaningful work. And so here, is how the proactive support with Skyline works at a high level. You got to do a couple of things. It's a few steps. First you got to install and you configure a lightweight appliance called the Skyline Collector into your environment. And the process takes most customers around 15 to 30 minutes to complete. But then once the collector is installed and configured to your endpoints, it actually starts to listen, right? To start collecting product usage data and capturing patterns, events, trends, configurations, a lot of stuff. And then based on the patterns, right, of the design, configuration, compliances, and things like that across different products and how that data is interacted, right? Skyline then performs a comprehensive analysis of your environmental details and that product usage data. And then it compares that against VMware best practices and knowledge-based articles, and so with that being said, at that point, Skyline then acts to provide proactive findings and recommendations. And you basically have access through our web-based portal. And so with that being said, right, from a high level, diagram point of view, the architecture basically looks like this, right? First, you've got the cloud services organization that you'll create. And then a component of that is the cloud service organization. That's the users, specifically users that have access to the Skyline Advisor Pro service. And again, both of those sit within the cloud service organization wrapper that you create, which can also include other services like area operations, for example. And then once that's done, right, the collectors are then installed on your data centers on-prem. And then you can add various endpoints for that collector to monitor, right? And then these endpoints provide product usage data to the collector. And then that product usage data is then sent to our analysis platform in the cloud, where the results of those analyses appear as findings and recommendations in Skyline Advisor Pro. And with that being said, right, it's very important to keep those collectors healthy, because when they're not, it actually inhibits Skyline's ability to provide proactive findings and recommendations, and even inhibit the ability to allow you to basically use log assist. And with that being said, just make sure that if you're currently using Skyline, just ensure that all of your supported endpoints are connected to your collectors. Because if all your connectors, if they're not connected, Skyline's visibility is limited, right? And then obviously with that being said, it actually impacts its ability to deliver the most comprehensive recommendations that help you keep your environments out of harm's way. And inevitably, right, whenever I discuss how the collector works, questions about security come up. So let's get into it, right? When you activate Skyline, you consent to participate in Skyline's Enhanced Customer Experience Program, otherwise known as CEIP. And basically what that does is that it allows us to collect configuration, feature usage, performance data, as well as provide logs to give us recommendations and insights and support, and even basically just drive the overall improvement of the product. And with that being said, right, data that is collected is transmitted to us using TLS 1.2 encryption protocols, and product usage data is sent to us and is encrypted both in transit and at rest. And I should also point out that all data is tagged with legally identifiable customer information, and access is limited to employees in support and manage. But on top of that, they all must undergo training and receive manager approval. And in addition to that, I just got to also just add that no personally identifiable information, that PII, is collected. But with that said, you should avoid, entering personal data or sensitive data. You don't want to name your hosts or virtual machines or anything like that with personal names and with that stuff like that. And last but not least, we get this question a lot, so I'm going to go ahead and answer it. Skyline is SOC 2 compliant. And with that, Richard, I got the obligatory stuff out of the way. And so I want to now just move to the star of the show, Richard Harris of Rackspace. And so a little bit about Rackspace. I just want to set them up a little bit. Back when Rackspace technology launched in 1998, right? Hundreds of IT hosting companies were providing access to single tenant servers over the internet. But what those hosting companies didn't provide, however, was customer service, right? And that's where Rackspace excels. Making them a global leader in professional and managed services for public cloud infrastructure today. And with that, Richard, I want to officially welcome you. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your background, key areas of expertise, and when you started using products?
Absolutely. Richard Harris, and as Kelsey said, I do work for Rackspace Technology. I've been here at Rackspace for over 18 years now, so I'm one of those old school people. And with that, I've actually been playing with computers since the Commodore 64. I was very blessed as a young boy, and my dad bought us a computer, and he was smart enough to say that this is going to be the future. This is where the world's going to go. And so I have been playing with computers ever since. Love building them. I've got all of my kids into playing with computers, and they have now all actually built their own computers, their own gaming rigs. So we're very tech savvy in this house, and it's a passion. I genuinely love getting up every day, coming to work, and doing the things that I do. It is a gift, and I like to be able to use that gift within the world I live in.
That is awesome. It's definitely old school. I got to ask you a question though. Do you remember the TI 994A? Texas
Yes,
Instrument?
I do. Yes,
that was
I had
my
a friend who had
first
that.
computer. That was
Nice.
my first computer. That was before they even had floppy disks. You had to save all your data on cassette tapes and stuff like that. So
yep,
most definitely. That's awesome, man. And so
yeah, I had another friend with the Trash 80, for those who know that acronym. Yes. So yeah, very old school.
Very old school. So I got to ask you, man, can you give the audience, a snapshot of the environment that you're managing, including Skyline?
Sure, absolutely. So within the department that I'm in at Rackspace, we actually provide a solution for all of the rackers who are out there. Rackers are Rackspace employees, and we bring them in to give them an area that is safe, that is compliant for them to stand up platforms in. And right now we have 6 virtual centers that are all over the globe. Now, within those virtual centers, we've got multiple data centers that all report into those. And we have everything integrated with vCloud Director, NSXV associated with the Cloud Director. Right now, we're floating at just over 540 hypes. That number fluctuates, and you'll definitely understand as we go through this today why that number fluctuates so much. And with all of the resources that we have just within these 6 virtual centers, we've got over 3,600 VMs that runs. Now, that's not Rackspace as a whole. That is solely the config that myself and the team RSI that I work on actually manages at this time. And so Skyline actually is running within all of those 6 virtual centers. And the nice thing about it is they do run globally. So even though we've got some in Australia and we've got some in Hong Kong, they all actually report back up through the single Skyline interface. And so we have a single endpoint to go to for Skyline to get and consume the information that Skyline spits out.
You know, Richard, one of the survey results was one of the top features was the dashboard and the operational overview. You guys have VROps tied into Skyline?
We do actually use VROps. And so right now what we have is we have VROps aware of Skyline. And so when Skyline alerts on something, VROps actually emails us out and says, hey, there's this Skyline item that has been hit. So we'll get emails not only from Skyline itself, but we will also get it from within VROps. So we have multiple monitoring tools that we use in order to watch our environment.
Very good. Very good. And so with that being said, you know, you've already sort of touched base a little bit, but can you expand a little bit on, matter of fact, you know what, let's just make this a rapid fire session here. So I'm just going to go ahead and build this out, my friend. So tell us about, you know, what did you do in terms of like, when did you start using Skyline, you know, and how are you using it? You know, has your usage of the product changed over time? What were you expecting when you installed it? And what's the most, you know, powerful or compelling reason for organizations to adopt the technology if they're not using it today?
So we were actually an early adopter of Skyline. We weren't the first, but we were one of the first few companies that actually adopted. And it was a nice thing. Our TAM hit us up and said, hey, you know, we want you to try this. And we kind of looked at it and we were like, okay, well, you know, it looks like this kind of overlaps with some stuff that we have running. And we weren't too sure if it was really going to be a long-term solution. Obviously, here I am years later, still talking about the product. So I firmly believe in what the Skyline feature set actually brings to us. And so initially, wasn't really too excited because we had so many other things that already was going to monitor the same stuff. But once we actually had it installed and running, there was one thing that we saw that was merit-worthy, that just really sunk in the power that came with Skyline. And what it boils down to is you look at your different monitoring tools, and all these different monitoring tools are very reactive in nature. You are seeing things in real time as they're happening. Well, as Kelsey mentioned during the presentation of Skyline, Skyline is truly proactive. There was an item that we saw in there that we didn't see because of how we inherit hypervisors. And so Skyline proactively noted that and actually alerted us to that. And for me, that is the most compelling reason of why you should look at deploying Skyline. If you haven't yet, it's very simple. And once you have it installed, it is going to look at VMware's best practices and apply those to your config and give you information and alerts and say, hey, this may not be optimal the way that you have it configured.
That's awesome. And so obviously I got to talk about it. You know, the last 2 years obviously have been very challenging for everyone. You know, how has your company adapted and maintained, you know, business resiliency, right? And what role did Skyline play in those efforts?
So with us, we have had several company acquisitions during that time period, and we've had a lot of scaling of internal systems. The nice thing is we were already prepared as a company to have offsite. So our company was fully prepared to have all of our rackers working remote. So very quickly, items were already being consumed. They just got consumed more. Now with Skyline, what we do is whenever we inherit new hypervisors, Skyline automatically starts examining these hypervisors. And the process of doing it literally is nothing for you as an individual. Once you have Skyline running, it simply is going to start ingesting these new hypes as it comes in. So as we inherit these new companies and as we're bringing stuff into our estate, that's whenever we start getting metrics on it. And again, we're going back to the reactive versus proactive. If you're inheriting stuff and you're bringing these new hypervisors in, it's not an error. It's the way that it was brought into your vCenter. So there may be things that are configured on your hypervisors that aren't actually optimal. And if you don't have your little checklist, your human checklist and your automated checklists and all these other things that go through, there may be something in there that because it's not an error, you're not alerted to.
You know, and with that, you know, just want to expand on that a little bit. You know, you touched on something that I think everybody in the audience can relate to, right? You know, and it ties to what you said earlier, you know, just being asked to do more with less, right? Especially when it comes to optimizing, you know, customer support interactions, right? You know, it seems as if, you know, Skyline is, and I think you said it best in the little promo video there, you know, that the tool has evolved to becoming more than a tool, quite frankly, to becoming an extended member of your team, right? It's that extra set of eyes that you talked about that actually helping you, you know, monitor your environments more effectively and efficiently.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great way that it can basically take over as an additional person on your team. I really love Manny. Yeah, Manny's great to have there because you do everything that you can, but we are all human. And as we bring in infrastructure, we have our checklists. We know that what the things we're supposed to do, but things might slip through the crack. And Manny is sitting there observing your infrastructure. And within a few hours of bringing new hypervisors in, many times we actually get alerts as we're bringing these new hypervisors in. And Skyline's pre-alerting us while we're going through our automated checklist of, oh, hey, by the way, you have this hype that's actually not in configuration. You might want to do something about it. You know, be it an older patch version or be it a redundancy that you might require within your estate.
Very, very cool. And so, you know, with that said, right, you know, earlier, you know, I gave everybody a quick overview of the features within Skyline. But with that being said, you know, it's been a while since you and I have talked. So, you know, what's been your initial impression of Skyline Advisor Pro as a whole, and how are you and your team benefiting from it?
I definitely really enjoy Advisor Pro. It's been modified as time has gone on. The original Advisor, the original summary information gave you some detailed information, but it was difficult to consume. The new Advisor Pro, the information that is spit out is much easier to understand. It gives you a truly nice splash screen, and especially for engineers and architects who are having to present this to senior level or even C-levels within our companies or presidents, it makes it a lot easier to simply show them this report and makes it more consumable for them and gives them, you can take that report and pull out the graphs and simply give them the graphs and say, look, here's where we were, here's where we are. And Skyline is helping us do that.
Very good. And, you know, and if I had to summarize everything that you've said, right, you know, I think you've definitely hit the nail on the head in terms of, you know, what the team was trying to do. You know, we've listened to our customers, and they said a couple of things. They said they wanted the service to be faster. We've got accelerated analysis, that surfaces those issues, those remediation updates, those inventory changes, more quickly, giving our customers, again, that more time to act on the findings. Customers like they said they wanted the service to be smarter, and Skyline, like you said, it offers those insight reports. It offers more intelligence. It provides end of life guidance and historical insights. And then lastly, people like you, and people in the audience, they said they wanted the service to be easier. We heard that too. And like you said, we've redesigned the user interface. It's a simpler user experience, while at the same time, working on another top request, the API, where customers can extract findings data, and that can be used to do some automation. And in our pre sort of interview, you mentioned endpoint discovery, and I noticed that bulk import and things like that was a top feature. So with that, I want to just segue into a quick demo, if that's okay.
Let's do it.
All right. And so, as soon as you log into the dashboard, right, you're going to get a notification that the service has detected some unconnected endpoints in your environment, right? And when you click on the appropriate endpoint, it's actually going to take you to Skyline's inventory page. And here, you're going to get an opportunity to see all of your eligible endpoints, complete with key information such as host name, version, system, cluster, as well as the collector that's reporting their eligibility, right? And you have the option to select or dismiss any combination of endpoints. But keep in mind that once that endpoint is dismissed, you won't have the ability to leverage that automated endpoint detection feature in the future. But should you decide to add it later, you can still manually add it that traditional way. And then with that said, right, now that you've selected all of the endpoints that you want to add, we can go ahead and we can download and complete a CSV template, right? You got to fill in all your credentials, including username and password. And then once that template is complete, right, you can launch the bulk operation featuring your collector. And then you just simply, basically at that point, you just click continue to participate in our improvement program. You take the CSV file that Skyline has generated, and then after the verification, right, you can then execute the bulk operation, right? And then once that operation is complete, you can confirm that the endpoints are connected and they've been added onto the system status tab. And so, booyah. And so that's the demo of that.
And I have to say that's really, really slick. I love that. And I'm excited. That feature came out very recently, right, Kelsey?
Yeah. Yes,
so
indeed.
I actually haven't had the opportunity to use it yet, but starting in the new year, we're definitely going to be using it. One of the things I want to do is, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have Skyline reporting through VROps. So not only do we get the emails from Skyline, but we also get them from VROps. But now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to do Skyline to actually monitor our VROps instance itself. So it will also be reporting with best practices and health information. So it's going to be this whole cross thing, which is what so many of these products are, is they're crossing each other. And so that is one of the things that I've mentioned VROps, and you even mentioned VROps in here several times. If you don't have VROps, then why don't you have Skyline? I mean, you have to have at least one of them. In my opinion, you need to have both of them. But if you don't have VROps, if your company has decided not to spend the budget on VROps, I totally understand. Get Skyline in there because Skyline will give you even more details than what VROps gives you.
That is a beautiful segue. You couldn't have set it up better, right? So let's talk about the operational overview dashboard and the benefits that you feel that it provides you and your company.
Well, one of the things that we all look at within VROps is we can see our global estate. We can see how many VRMs are running. And from there, you have to do a lot of deep analysis. You have to configure a whole bunch of different reports to generate. And you actually get more detail on the operational overview dashboard from VMware Skyline product versus VROps. VROps, you got to go do a lot of configure. You got to understand how to move stuff around and create those. With Skyline, it's there. One of the things that I was blown away with was whenever Skyline actually started reporting BIOS information. And that's crazy important. Going back, a few years now, one of the big things that hit the whole IT industry was the Spectre meltdown issue. With that to resolve, you have to have very specific BIOS in order to ensure that you're compliant within the Spectre meltdown universe. And so having that BIOS information display within the overview dashboard is great. And it makes it so easy for us as engineers and architects to make sure that we're going through and resolving those issues. And this goes back to one of the things I mentioned, whenever you import new hypervisors, as you acquire from another division of your company or whatever, some reason you've received a new hype. Well, you don't have to necessarily reboot it or do some power CLI foo in order to pull a BIOS revision number. You give it just a little bit. For us, it started at 48 hours. Was roughly how long it took Skyline to use to run and consume. But now, literally within just, I know it technically, I'm pretty sure it's like 4 to 6 hours, but it seems usually within minutes. It happens within minutes that you can go in and look at your, at your dashboard. So bring it in the morning, go to lunch. By the time you're done with lunch, you can already tell.
Or drink some coffee.
Yeah.
And with that, man, you know what? I think that's a perfect segue into another feature demo. Let's take a look at that in action. And so, the dashboard is a great tool, whether you use it frequently or not, right? The operational overview and the inventory, it actually gives insight into what the collectors are monitoring, right? And when it's an exact match to what I know about my environment, it actually increases my confidence, right? And with that being said, as you can see, from the configuration summaries and pie charts, there's a lot happening here, a lot of data that provides Skyline, great insights that's going to allow you to do your job more effectively. So whether you're, so if you're using Skyline, just again, make sure that you've got all of those endpoints connected, using that automated endpoint detection feature. It's the best way to ensure that you're getting the most comprehensive recommendations, again, to keep your environment safe. And so with that, Richard, I want to just ask you another question. How do you and your team, how do you develop and implement your remediation plans?
So a lot of ours is driven with our different compliance teams. Many people on this call, I'm sure, are bound by at least one compliance standard. PCI being the most typical, of course, then you got, SOX and all sorts of other ones globally. And so anything that comes up that's critical, 30 days. And you can do all sorts of automation through Skyline. You can actually use Skyline, and Sony on the call has done a phenomenal amount of job within that compliance infrastructure. You just use the reporting information, tell it to go off and do its stuff, and you're good to go. Unfortunately, some other organizations and companies are held to a very stringent, this is the way that it's written up in your old documentation, so this is the procedure that you have to follow. And so regardless, you now have your endpoint that you can go and look at Skyline and see those critical findings and find any of the outliers. We patch our boxes and we reboot our boxes, and they come up, and we look at VUM or whatever tool we're using to automate our patching with, and we're assuming that it was done because we get reports from that. Well, Skyline is going to be your true source of authority that's going to actually let you know, have you remediated this? Is everything looking good? Might you have missed something in it? Could there have been an accidental reboot that didn't happen within the lifecycle manager, and it actually didn't reboot that hype, and the hype didn't get it fully applied? Well, Skyline will help you with that, because it's going to display that this one hype still is vulnerable to this specific, CVE.
Sonny, Michelle?
Hey, Kelsey.
Yes.
My mic went out. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And so, Richard, were you I'm sorry, I just lost connection there for a second.
No, that's perfectly okay. So
Yeah.
with the summary being that Skyline gets you a source of truth after you do your remediation plans to make sure that you've actually had everything patched within your environment.
And with that, Richard, you mentioned in an earlier conversation that, Skyline gives you a lot of information, and sometimes it may give you too much information, right? You mentioned that you guys are taking advantage of the hide feature. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, we have NSXV within our estate. Well, we have that specifically because we have vCloud Director. And for those of you who run vCloud Director, you know that old school vCloud Director, I'm talking 5 series and olders, had this little thing called vShield. And as you upgraded and went along, you had to go from vShield to NSXV. And from NSXV, we're going to NSXT. Well, we don't actually use virtualized networks within our old environments. Our new environments, that's a whole other story, but our old environments, they don't use it. We consume traditional VLAN encoded networks within our network infrastructure itself. So keeping that in mind, that means that we have a bunch of NSXVs that are there as a requirement for Cloud Director, but we're not consuming them. We're not using them. We simply have it there as a service to make Cloud Director happy. So one of the things that we always, for a while, we were getting alerted on was you don't have backups configured for your NSXV. We don't want backups. There's nothing in there. It's literally just a program to make vCloud Director happy. And so we've gone in and we've now muted those alerts within Skyline because we don't want them showing up on a report. We don't want anybody questioning, going, why don't you have this backed up? And then here comes a 5-minute long conversation of the history and why this thing isn't needed. And that's just one example. There may be other examples within various estates that you know that this is a mitigated issue. It's mitigated through other means, so you don't want to be alerted by this. So you can go in and you can mute those things. Now, if it changes, for example, if we started to consume NSXV, which we won't now, but if we chose to, then we could go in and actually unmute that and put it back into the fray and let us know again, hey, you don't have these backups configured.
Right. With that, let's just go ahead and look at the hide feature in action. I want to do a quick demo of that. And so, like you said, Skyline's dashboard, it actually allows you the ability to filter active findings based on a variety of different things, such as category, finding type, and even severity, right? And since I'm not interested in my trivial findings at the moment, right, I can apply a filter and I can isolate them with a single click. And with them isolated, I can hide them all. Mind you, like you said, they haven't been deleted. They're just no longer included in my active findings tab. And if I want to see them, they're going to be available underneath my hidden findings tab. And I can even filter objects for a specific finding as well. And this is really useful if you've got objects that are a part of a test dev environment or a soon to be decommissioned host for Skyline to monitor. You won't actually hide the finding itself, but you'll prevent that object from being included in the affected object list of that finding. So here's an example, right? I've got a finding here that's got multiple objects that could be impacted, but one of the objects is part of my test dev environment, and I don't want that to appear in my object list, right? So to remedy this, I can go to my inventory tree, I can find the object, and then I can hide it, right? And then that object's no longer going to be in my affected object list until I decide to unhide it. And then, with my active findings list customized to focus only on what is important to me and my team, I can even export that as a CSV file for other members of my team to leverage for reporting and remediation, leveraging Power CLI and leveraging the API and a lot of the great stuff that Sonny's been working on. And one of my favorite features, let's talk about log assist.
It makes
let's
it
talk
so
about
easy. Like seriously, so easy. Many of us have, we don't have direct access to our vCenters. Most companies require multiple hops in order to ensure that your vCenters are actually all protected. So this means that you have to go to typically a Windows jump box or some other solution to get to the vCenter. So to get logs exported typically means you have to export to that local window or to that remote Windows machine, and then somehow you have to get those logs. If that Windows machine has internet access, which they may not, you now have to somehow get those log files off of that machine to your desktop so you can send them up and over to VMware. And full transparency, I've had that take an entire shift before, just trying to get those log files moved, because some of these log files can be massive. Well, the nice thing about the log assist is as soon as you create your SR, you can actually log into the Skyline and say, here's my SR, and it appears within the infrastructure or within the Skyline portal, and you can say, I want to upload a log bundle, and poof, push a button, and it does all the magical work for you. Or VMware may say, hey, we don't need the logs at the beginning. You start working through the problem, and then they go, you know what? I think we do need the logs. Let's go ahead and send the logs to us. We've sent a request. Well, you just log into the Skyline portal and you hit one button. Yes, approve. And it approves the upload. Right. You go and you log into your vCenter, and woof, you're already seeing this thing being bundled up and shipped off for you. So it truly makes that a one click. And it makes it so much easier, especially for those of us who have to do the multiple jumps for security. Yeah. There's no stress, no muss, no fuss, no coconuts kind of thing whenever it comes to it.
Can I quote you on that?
Absolutely.
I will definitely do that, my friend. And so with that, let's just take a look at this in action, right? And so, if you're a Skyline customer, right, like you said, you can speed the resolution of an open support request by sending log bundles to our support team using our log assist feature, right? Like you said, log assist basically automates that process of manually creating those log bundles. All you got to do is just simply select where you want to retrieve the log, and Skyline does the rest, right? Ensuring that our support team gets the information that they need to quickly begin troubleshooting. And then once that log transfer has been initiated, right, the log bundles are automatically uploaded to our global support services portal. It's a direct transfer that is no fuss, no muss, no coconuts, no FTP sites are needed. And also our support engineers can even request log bundles from you as well. Like you said, right, you've got the option to either to approve or to reject that request. But please note that if you would like for them to pull logs, be sure to tell them the object name. And if our support engineers require even more, you can even enable that auto approve to save even more time. And then, since all of our log transfers are actually recorded in Skyline's log library page, right, you've got complete visibility into who actually initiated the log transfer process, giving you an end-to-end solution to track the resolution of your support request. And if you are an admin, right, be sure to take advantage of our SR visibility option. It's located under our advanced settings, and you can monitor the status of support requests from other members within your support team. And Richard, when we filmed this, where were you, man? Our people couldn't contact your people. We wanted you to be in this video. Where were you, my friend?
I was out doing stuff.
Awesome. And so
more than likely I was doing that training. For those, if there's too bad of a glare, it's powered paragliding. I went and actually took a class to do that. So
nice. And so let's talk about metrics and quantification. I know it's a hard thing to do, but can you give us some insight into how do you quantify the benefits that Skyline's providing?
So for us, it is primarily the time that it takes to look over your infrastructure and get the VMware's best practices. One of the things that I mentioned earlier within the discussion was whenever you import new hypervisors, you get reactive information from your other monitoring tools. We actually had a very interesting scenario that played out live for us, and this was actually what truly cemented Skyline in my head as to why Manny was needed and why we liked Manny so much. We inherited this hype that had a proper config on it. It looked correct. We brought it within the estate. What we didn't see was HBAs weren't redundant. And if you don't have redundant HBAs and you've never experienced a storage outage due to a lack of redundant HBAs, well, here's a scenario that can happen for you, and it's happened in the past. I have had customers who have not paid for redundancy, And so you have a Linux machine that's running on a hypervisor that does not have redundant paths to the storage. Well, when that happens, when your storage goes out, the guest OS actually goes into read-only mode, which sounds okay. It won't be that big of a deal. The problem is, if you don't have something specifically monitoring for that, you're not alerted to that. If you don't log into that box, you don't realize that this underlying OS disk or additional disks are in read-only mode. So I've had customers run with this stuff for days. That means literally nothing's getting written to the disk. So log files aren't being written. If you have a database there that is supposed to be doing some type of e-commerce transactions, it's not actually writing those transactions back to the disk. And that all boils back to the fact that you don't have redundant paths on the storage node. So your team goes out and within your storage fabric, they do a maintenance on one of your switches. Well, that's the only switch that your HBA and hypervisors connected to. You've just spent all of those VMs and turned them into read-only mode. Windows recovers. For those who don't like Windows, Windows actually recovers from that issue very smoothly and very gracefully. For Linux, it's a reboot. That's the simplest way you can solve it. So with this, again, we do everything that we can. We have all of these checklists. We know by default all of our hypervisors coming to us have redundant HBAs. Well, this particular team didn't have redundant HBAs that we inherited this stuff from a company that we acquired. And so Skyline caught it. Skyline caught it before it was a problem. So VROps didn't have to react. Linux team didn't have to react. We were alerted to this before it actually became a customer impacting problem. And as soon as you think e-commerce, well, you're down for however long it takes you to recognize and reboot that machine. You could be out a few $1,000s, or you could literally be out millions of dollars, depending on what your business is. So how do you quantify that? You really can't, because you've proactively taken care of the issue. But it lets us all sleep better at night, because my pal Manny is sitting there looking at
He's
your
in the
estate.
house, man.
He is phenomenal. He or she, I'm not quite sure what Manny is. We've been trying to figure that out.
I don't know.
She's a she. Yeah.
Okay.
She's a she. Okay.
So
Yeah.
It's official.
she is awesome. I absolutely love that
She's
Manny
awesome.
is sitting there, because she genuinely looks at it and compares it. This is something that Manny caught. She saw that we don't have redundancy within those HBAs. And I was floored, absolutely floored, because again, it's not a reactive thing, it's a proactive thing. And so that's what, just as soon as I saw that, I called up my TAM and I'm like, oh my goodness, I love this product. Product is amazing. And here we are several years later, and I'm an evangelist for Manny and Skyline.
Awesome. And so we're coming into the home stretch. And so with that being said, right, any parting advice for our audience, what best practices or tips and tricks would you give to your peers if they're not already using Skyline?
If you're not already using it, it is simply stupidly simple, is what I like to say, to install and configure. And especially now with the endpoint ingestion that Kelsey showed earlier, you don't have to do all of the manual configuration that I did whenever I initially installed this. It's a lightweight appliance, genuinely a small little appliance. We never have any alerts for the appliance itself, for CPU or RAM or anything like that. It's so simple to get installed that for me, it's a no-brainer. Even if you find, which I doubt, but even if you find that it's simply giving you the same information, then at least you know that those VMware best practices are being applied. But more important, once you get it installed, I would be surprised if you don't find one, maybe two outliers that you didn't realize weren't properly configured or had some weird thing on it that you didn't know about. Like we did, we go through these checklists. We have our automation, we have our manual processes that check our automation, and it missed this with those redundant HBAs, because again, it's not in alert. And so this compares to the best practices.
And one of the things that you talked about in, team, we're always listening and providing feedback. And I know that you and I talked about that. You care to elaborate about the feedback mechanism?
Yes. One of the things that we're very adamant about within all of our industry is to make sure that the companies that we work with are receptive to the feedback and action those items. And there has been definite stuff that we've come up with, myself and the whole RSI team within Rackspace have come up and said, hey, here's some areas we can see some improvement with Skyline, and those items have been implemented. I know one of the things that I said early on was initially installing it was time consuming, and look at what they've done. They've now taken that feedback from everybody, which is like typical with VMware and their GUIs. It's just up in the corner. You click on the feedback and you can give them feedback right there. Of course, I'm sure you can, email Kelsey in here or anybody else. Yeah, so it's right there. Crazy simple. Look at that. So now I know most of the interfaces from VMware have this, but the nice thing is they've actually listened to us. And with most of the levels that I'm sure all of us are within this webinar, we have those partnerships with VMware. We have those where we know whenever we submit these questions or suggestions, they're going to listen to us. And I love that it's so simple to do that.
Stupidly simple.
Yes.
And with that, Richard, man, that concludes our session. We hope that everyone in attendance, we hope you all found it informative. And if you're not using Skyline, I hope Richard changed your mind, and we encourage you to adopt on the spot and start using it today. There's a getting started link here, and you can just go and install Skyline. And if you want to even test drive it, we've got a hands-on lab where you can try it out in our sandbox environment, and you can even visit the other URLs on the page here. You can get, questions to frequently answers, I should say, to frequently asked questions. And if you still have questions, we've got a very encouraging community. It's heavily moderated, and we encourage you all to check it out. And there's also some additional resources that you can leverage as well. We've got the Skyline Task Force, which consists of internal SMEs who host free Skyline workshops remotely for anyone who's interested or already using the service for that matter. Then there's also our certification badge. It's a free course, that validates your skills, for supporting, managing, and even planning environments through proactive monitoring, right, and issue remediation. And then finally, we've got the automation toolkit. It leverages the API, right? And then this toolkit allows cloud admins and SREs to automate a lot of Skyline's proactive intelligence with their own tools and processes and things along those lines. And then last but not least, I just want to bring attention to a pretty cool game, a gamified experience that we've just recently created. The Skyline team, we're calling on all of our technologists, and we're even recruiting new agents to join the Skyline Proactive Unit, otherwise known as the SPU, right? To help keep our IT environment stable, secure, and resilient. And as you work through this gamified mission that consists of 10 targets or 10 findings, right? You get points, you increase your rank within the proactive unit, and you even get some cool swag, and there's even a leaderboard. And we want to see your names on it. And with that, we're going to just say thank you. And if there's any additional questions, or if anyone wants to come off mute and talk, we can do that as well. Michelle, was there anyone who wanted to share any experiences?
We had a great response. So Rohit, Mike, and Robert are all getting t-shirts. Nice.
And I think we're at time, or we got about 60 seconds left.
I would like to say one more thing. Y'all have a really, really good class associated around this. And there's a Credly badge associated as well. I took it. Good stuff. If you've not played with Skyline before, the class gives you a great insight. It's a great way to actually view all of the services within Skyline before having to install it. But again, it's so simple. Just get it installed. You'll love it.
Thanks, sir. And with that, bid you adieu.
Yep. Happy
Thanks for
holidays,
attending.
everyone.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays.